This tutorial will run through the basics needed to get TALOS up and running. The left monitor is dedicated to stage left, which mainly contains configuring and setup screens, such as Backstage and rehearsal. The right monitor has center stage, where we place players when we want to move them. Players are any piece of stage machinery that TALOS can operate, in this case hoists. TALOS opens on the show file screen. To scan the network for new controllers, we must create a new show file. Click the New button, and in the New Show File pop-up window, enter a name and description for your file. I like to use a description that contains the location of the venue, along with any special directions. But you can choose whatever works best for you. Click the Enter button when ready. Changes must be saved with the Save button, or they will be lost. The show file contains all the configuration data, as well as any moves you have created. Now that we have a show file created, let's go backstage and scan our network for connected controllers. TALOS must be online in order to detect controllers. Click the Online button located here. Notice the Scan button changes from gray to blue, indicating that it is now enabled. Click the Scan button to begin the discovery process. TALOS begins looking for any controllers connected to its Profinet and Modbus networks. These connections are located on the rear panel of TALOS main. It takes a few minutes for TALOS to go through all of the possible IP addresses. When TALOS discovers a new controller, it automatically configures all the communication parameters necessary to operate any players connected to the controller. When it's done scanning, the Backstage screen will start to populate with the controllers TALOS has discovered, along with their connected players. You can see the status lights for the controllers and the players start to illuminate. Assessing the Motion Labs subsystems that were discovered, we see some controllers that are fixed speed, as well as some that are variable speed. Controllers have different channel configurations depending on their type, like VSO1 has 12 channels available. Each controller and player appear as a smart icon. Smart icons store important setup data that provide operating information, such as communication protocols for the controllers. For example, this JJ Plus Smart icon is providing hoist nameplate data that includes model number, load limit, and speed limit. Another element that appears backstage is this purple section called the controller dock. This one has 24 channels, letting you know that the VSO2 controller has connections for 24 players. TALOS has detected 3 players as shown here. It has obtained the names of the players from the controller. If you want to change them, you can, and we demonstrate this in another tutorial. I mentioned status lights earlier. They are an indication of the controller's readiness to operate. This is the communication status light. It must be green for TALOS to operate any of its players. The light is green when TALOS is online and when the controller is connected and in TALOS mode. You must consult the controller's manual in order to see how to place it in the correct mode. TALOS is examining the connection state of the Profinet or Modbus driver to determine if the controller is connected. Let's go back to the OK light. This light will appear as an orange gear when the TALOS configuration does not match the controller's configuration. Let me demonstrate. Right-click on a player and select Edit Parameters to edit the maximum and minimum operating parameters. Currently, TALOS parameters and controller's parameters match. But if I change one of the parameters, for instance, I'll change this from 10 to 11. Did you see what happened? The OK light went from a green OK to an orange gear, indicating that TALOS and the controller did not agree. Also, this orange ring around the player is letting you know which player's configuration does not match. You would not be able to operate the player in this condition. This is easily remedied either by sending TALOS parameters to the player's controller or by receiving the controller's parameters by clicking the Receive button. The controller status goes back to being OK and the player status turns back to green. OK, the next status light I want to show you is the remote control status light. To demonstrate it, I have plugged a remote control into one of our VS01 controllers. You can see that the light now appears blue, indicating that the remote is plugged in. Also, note that the COM and OK status lights are not illuminated because the remote is plugged in. To operate any of the players on this controller, we must first unplug the remote. In doing so, the remote status light will turn gray and the COM and OK status lights come back on, indicating that the players on this controller are ready for operation. Let's scroll back to our VS02 Controller 1. Now I'll show you what the status light looks like on a controller when it's faulted. I'm going to hit the local emergency stop on this controller, causing it to generate a fault. The OK light changed from OK to this red triangle, indicating that the controller is now faulted. Even when you reset the key stop at the controller, you must also reset the fault from the message display on center stage. Now the alarm banner, the fault tab, and the reset fault button all appear as red. Click on the fault tab to reveal the fault messages. A master fault was generated by TALOS and would have stopped all players that TALOS was moving at the time of the fault, regardless of their controller's status. Simply click the reset button to clear both faults. The fault status light goes away and the OK button illuminates, indicating that there are no faults and that our configuration parameters agree. The status lights on the players are green, indicating they are ready for operation as well. In order to place them on center stage, we must go to Showtime by selecting the Showtime navigation tab. The Showtime screen contains the player tree, which lists all the players configured in the system. To place a player on center stage from this tree, you must be in either manual mode or position mode. We are in manual mode, as indicated here. I'm going to select Hoist 1 and Hoist 2. You must hold Ctrl or Shift to select multiple players. They appear on center stage as player channels, which display channel status. Let's quickly review center stage. If you're familiar with Motion Labs subsystems, you will recognize the three buttons housed in the control panel. Player power supplies power to the motor, or in the case of a variable speed hoist, it enables the drive. Arm sends the motion set points and/or direction to the controllers and waits for acknowledgement back. Run acts as a momentary push button in manual, position, and Q modes and will cause the players to move. It is enabled when the hold to run circuit is made. Currently, we are using a foot switch. A blue runner appears when the circuit is made. The foot switch must be held down along with the run button in order to move the players. Releasing either will stop all motion. The next two sections of the control center are dependent on which mode you're in and the type of players you have on center stage. If we were in position mode, this pop-up would appear for entering a position set point. But since we're in manual mode, which only requires a direction, the up and down direction buttons are displayed. Selecting a direction from here assigns the direction to all the players on center stage. Notice the green ring that appears around the button when you've selected it. This is an indication that the controllers have all received and confirmed the direction that TALOS has sent to them. If a controller does not confirm the direction, TALOS will deselect the button and the arrow will remain gray. In manual mode, you must have a direction selected for all the players on center stage or you will not be able to arm the system. Because we have variable speed players on center stage, the speed panel is displayed. Let's enter speed parameters for these players. I want them to run 16 feet per minute with acceleration and deceleration rates of 1 second each. Selecting the Set All button sends these parameters to all VFD players on center stage. To individually set each player's speed, right-click on the speed set point and select Enter Set Point. I will change Hoist 1 speed to 15 feet per minute. Here you see it changed to 15, while Hoist 2 is set at 16 feet per minute. The last section I'll show you is the message display. This is where faults and warnings can be viewed. Earlier, we saw what a fault looks like. The offline warning appears in yellow. A fault is an error that occurred while the player was moving, whereas a warning is a condition that won't allow a player to begin moving. When we go back online, the warning goes away. If a warning appears in the message display, the arm button will become disabled. Now let's move these players up and down so that you can watch the player channels in action. First, we must apply power by pressing the player power button. Since both players have an assigned direction and there aren't any warnings, the arm button is enabled. When we apply player power, if, for example, we remove the direction we have set by selecting the up direction on the control center again, then the arm button becomes disabled because the players no longer have a direction selected. Since I want to move Hoist 1 down and Hoist 2 up, I need to use the direction buttons provided on the slider channels, which allow me to set the direction of each independently of the other. Now that we have directions set for both players, the arm button is enabled again. When we press it, Talos sends the direction and the speed set points to the players' controllers. When the controllers verify that they have received the information, the arm button will light up and enable the run button. Now we are ready to move the players. Press and hold the run button. How come the players are not moving? Notice that the blue runner is gray, which means that the hold to run circuit is not made. Remember, both the hold to run device and the run button must be made in order to move the players. So, I must hold down the foot switch. When I do, the blue runner appears. Now, when I hold down run, the players begin to move. We can see the player's current position, direction, and speed. The load weight is available if the player is equipped with a load cell. I stopped the players by releasing the run button, but releasing the foot switch also would have stopped the players. Remove power from the players by selecting the Energize Player Power button. That concludes this Talos tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for watching.